Okay. See, I still okay. See, now the microphone thing is kind of doing its little thing where it moves when I talk. So I'm sick and it sounds like I'm listening to my voice through like a clogged I don't know what that I used to when I was a kid I used to explain like it feels like I have a bucket, like one of those beach buckets over my head. But yeah, but I'm showing up for this because I really wanna do it. And, as I was logging in, I had, like, one of my typical, like, sound problem things. I was thinking I was thinking about it, like, as I was, because like, I have to reboot or restart the computer and, like, re-enter the whole YouTube information thing. And I was doing it, and I was thinking, like, about how, this process that I'm about to walk you through, should you choose to participate, about my motivation for it. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing it? And it's interesting because, comparative to a lot of the, a lot of actually, okay. I guess I'd say compared to like a lot of popular culture that is super consumable and two of the really big ascensions, I guess, or actualizations or breakthroughs, two of them of multiple, from this past year, from 2023 for me, were about needing approval in this very particular way. And so it's interesting to be doing this, and it's like, I want to offer this to you, but my intention is that I'm not trying to get your money, and while this is infinitely more valuable than, like, programs that I see online that are, thousands of dollars. Yeah, and also in terms of even validation about success, I've already been incredibly successful, and I've already made myself wealthy, so the motivation for this is an offering to you. It's like kind of, it's part of the, self-actualization and self-transcendence is this feeling, and as I've described like the kite before, of having to do this for reasons that are just like it's a feeling and it's almost like a tension that when I do it, it absolves me of the tension. Like, I don't feel as tense, like, it releases something in me. There's also, part of the tension right now for me is figuring out how I bring this offering into the world, and also my own understanding of how this process for me, my own process, has been a really important part of that because I've had to divest adaptations that were holding me back from expressing myself in a way that was authentic. And I guess this is kind of like an infinite unfolding, but that there were layers that were kind of, like, contrived enough that they were obstacles to being able to express this, and what it has to offer in a way that is really true and revolutionary. I had a lot of aversion to how truly revolutionary this is, and a lot of this year for me also is about breaking out of a lot of my attachment to status quo, and it's actually, I don't know how much it's there. It's like it is there, but, like, my feelings, for it are, like, significantly more conscious. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk more on this, but, I don't know if it's that interesting. It's funny that the long form of this chapter opener that I did had no sound because there was a lot of editorial exposition about what the process was for the creation of this book. And if anyone ever wants to hear anything, I offer it up. It's been interesting that as far as following the kite, like following the inner integrity for me has really, and this has been a push-pull kind of thing, has really kept me away from even while I was writing the book, there was like there was like this like aversion sense, and it's not even like aversion, it's just guidance that it's like, don't invest energy in marketing. That's been consistent throughout this, and I find that frustrating at times because my own experience with this is so transformative, and with people I work with, it's so transformative, and people who are exposed to this and benefit from it, it's so transformative that I have this sense of wanting it. But I think that's also been something that has been part of my own revelation of it. Like my separateness is kind of I guess, a servant to this and doing kind of its bidding, whatever this entity the methodology contained in this book is. Oh, in the light. But anyway, yeah, because I keep thinking like, oh, should I just? And it's like, no. And it's the same kite that pulls me to show up for these is the same kite that is like really like turns the energy down. And this is something I think that's relatable in terms of, this is something I talked about when I started these at the beginning of last year, which was the way to actually divine your path in a way that's that's in alignment. Whether something's right for you, it's like whether there's like activation in it, and whether there isn't. And there's videos on this. I won't get into it. I'm sure they still hold up. But that's one of the things, and I guess I just want to express the fact that I've had a hard time with that. I've had a hard time at times because I've thought, well, I really want to be talking about this or putting stuff up on whatever. But I think like an important thing has been really like like being able to have this experience in the absence of almost any validation, and to experience it truly, so it isn't anything that is relative to other people telling me what it is, that it is so felt and known and understood in the core of my very being that it's transcendent of like the mechanisms of you know of being appreciated for it. It's like the appreciation comes from within. Like I appreciate myself from within. It's like it's from within, and that feeling is, yeah, it's everything, versus trying to do things that get me appreciation. It's like I can access appreciation right now. I can access validation right now. I can feel myself. I can know myself. And from there, like I guess we'll see where this goes. And that part of doing this chapter is related to his son is like frying my eyeball. Part of this chapter for me is revisiting this process for what comes next for me, and that we go along on this, on this process and this journey together. And as I've said before, this is hard. This is not this isn't like The Secret. I loved The Secret when it came out. Um, yeah, because there was something really, and I still maintain that there's an aspect of this which is like becoming the thing that The Secret did for me that was most memorable, which is basically it's just, it's like positive thinking gone, catastrophically wrong. Um, yeah. The thing that it really did for me was that, there's a whole thing, and we're gonna get this actually is applicable for what we're about to do, believe it or not, was, that there was all this stuff about vision boards, which is like, kind of like, get the keys to the, Lamborghini and walk around the mansion and all that stuff. And I don't think a lot of people really want that as much as they think they do. I think that I think it's like one of those things that's like, yeah, no, like I think what people want is like the approval and the validation of those achievements and the approval and validation from very specific people that ultimately represent validation and approval from themselves, within themselves, to be able to integrate and reunify and reconnect that, the circle, like to that this just inherent unity of what we are. And that was one of the exercises that I did that was kind of a self-exploration, which is like, what is it that I really want? Like, so if I'm gonna secret myself into, the abundance that I desire, what is it? Like, what does that look like? Because at the time, I mean, I already had a lot of nice stuff. I'd already kind of risen to a certain level of success at the time, and I could feel that it was not nearly as fulfilling as, I mean, it was exciting because it was new, and I'd been incredibly poor, and alone, and so it created this sense that I was actually somewhat safe and also that I was, like, surrounded by beautiful things, which is nice. Um, and I guess maybe it's part of it. So I wouldn't just say, like, "Don't do any of that." So that's another thing. But anyway, I had this one, and I just kind of kept saying, "Well, and then what? And then what? And then what?" Kinda similar to what I just did with, like, okay, well, you want the house to get the validation, to get the, that. I was like, "What am I wanting? What am I wanting?" And the thing that I came to understand was that I wanted to be free, and that was the goal. That it was clear to me that the freedom, and it was very specific. I had a visualization of what that looked and felt like. It was very, like, micro. It was actually just, it's interesting. I was, like, wearing a very specific pair of pants. It's really odd. They were like, yeah, it's not important to talk about, but there's just, like, a very very kind of a feeling to it. But most importantly, it was one thing. It was that I wanted to always be where I wanna be, or be conscious that what I'm doing and where I am is working towards being somewhere I wanna be. And what that means is, like, not working in a job, and this light is really a lot right now, so I don't know if it really matters, them turning further and further away into the corner. Soon it'll just, like, be my eyes. It'll just be, like, the top of my head cresting. Um, oh my gosh. But that, like, so to explain that a bit further is just, it's like to never find myself, like, just working somewhere where I'm like, "This is just awful, and I can't see an end to it." Because at the time that was happening, it was like I felt trapped. One of the things about this nice life I had at the time, didn't really understand it, and I felt very trapped in it, in the sense of, like, I had to keep doing things that I didn't like doing in order to be able to sustain these nice feelings, like, of being safe and being surrounded by beautiful things. And so that was what I started to unpack in that process, as far as, building my own life. Oh my god, this light is really annoying me, but whatever. I hope it's not annoying you, right? So hi, I'm, like, leaning into you. Um, yeah, I hope you're this is, like, might become a personal space issue. Oh my god. Hi. Wait, like, I think I mean, it's moving. I don't know if it's gonna move during this reading. But so, okay, so that was editorial. Yeah. So, yeah. So back to the, why am I doing this? And also, one of the things is that making these videos, even I remember when I did this is one more thing I'll say before I start reading. Before I started the Parinoma for Beginners class, and this is just a show for me as I'm reflecting on some of the really, like, seismic changes and transformations of my own year, was that before Parinoma for Beginners, the first session began, I was sitting with a tremendous amount of, like, I was super activated. I was really nervous about it, and I was really nervous because if I'm really honest, and this was, like, middle of the year, so it's amazing how quickly this stuff can transform, like, and be worked through and transmuted into something new, is that my concern was that people would see that there weren't millions of people in the session and think that somehow that was, like, kind of embarrassing for me. So, yeah, and now that doesn't I mean, if I'm being honest, it's something that I'm coming to understand, first of all, like, why that actually would be to begin with, that this like, what this is and who it's for and how it exists in the world and what my role is in bringing it into the world as I'm continuing to explore that. But just that that was, that how and I was worried that what would happen is that people would see that there weren't, like, millions of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people in the sessions, and it would somehow create something for them that it wasn't good, and I was afraid that that was gonna block them from having an experience with it, that they were gonna be looking for a form of validation. So it's interesting to reflect back on, because now, I mean, the thing is like, after that, it's really, like, a point to make here is that after that, in my own process, oh, good, the sun is behind a building. After that, in my own process, through doing Parinama every day in every way, that it's actually I was planning to do a second round of Parinama for Beginners, and the kite slack just totally went limp, and there was no energy for it. And now it's understanding that it was almost like that was like a diagnostic for me, just without, a subconscious diagnostic to see those qualities. And it wasn't even conscious. It sounds like it's like conscious, but it like in reflection, seeing that that understanding that there were things like I needed people's validation from it, or I was like seeking it somehow, um, versus where I'm right now with understanding my role in this and being very, like, understanding what it is. When the book came out, I didn't understand what it was, and that made me really nervous because I felt a lot of pressure to be successful with it. And that pressure, like, led to a lot of kind of my own, like, an acceleration of my own adaptations showing up in a really cool way. I mean, it was really uncomfortable when it was happening, but yeah, and I actually won't deconstruct them bit by bit. It's just coming up right now, and I have a cold, so it's like it's just coming out, like, not that that makes a huge difference, um, but I'd never done Parinama start to finish. I'd written the book, I'd done the process, I'd done it out of sequence, and even when the book came out, people would say, "Well, how do I do this?" And I was kinda like, "Well, however it kinda strikes you." And now I have a really, reasonable amount of clarity that has to do with how to very effectively use this methodology to transform oneself. And yes, there's a lot of ways that you can use this book. You can sort of like open it to this, to that, to this, to that, but it's not really great for that. This is kind of like the medical grade high test, like, you know, industrial, I hesitate to use that word, but the potency of this is like, should be like used with a prescription kind of thing, like used under like sort of some level of guidance. And also, one of the things, it's almost like, like medicine, where it's like, okay, well, you tried herbal tea, and you tried, like maybe some echinacea, and finally you went to the drugstore and used some over the counter stuff. And like each gave you a little bit of relief, each gave a little bit of relief, but then ultimately it's like, well, you need to go to the doctor. And so in this analogy, this is either the like surgery or an antibiotic. I don't know. Like, I don't love antibiotics as an analogy for this, but it's like this is not an entry level process. If there's any chance that whatever angst lives and exists within you can be managed through just like a day or two of rest and some nice tea, and like maybe a couple like acetaminophen, you know, whatever, like a Tylenol or whatever, or Advil or naproxen or whatever the British thing is, that's actually like, that's it. Like and that's, so if it's like the Four Agreements and The Secret, and that's kind of where one is in the process, like that's where it's at. And this is like, this is like driving straight to the OR and being like, let's do the let's do the lung transplant. Like, it's really not. I mean, it's, we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens with this, like, in, what kind of becomes uncovered here in this. But I will say that my own personal transformation has been so extraordinary, but the commitment I've had to make towards it and how much change it has absolutely like shattered the old version of my life. And not that I was, like, wanting that totally, but I was also wanting it. I wanted freedom, and that was the thing when I was doing The Secret. What I, like, sort of brought into my sort of hyper focus was, like, I want freedom. I want to be free. I wanna be free from this. I wanna be free from all these feelings. These bad feelings of being trapped in something that I can't put my finger on, of being lost, of being confused, in many ways, of not of like this kind of relationship with myself where I always have to be doing things to earn my worth. Where I always have to be kind of like every day waking up and it's like a new, it's like the scoreboard is cleared and it's time again to prove, sort of put points up on the board. And, all of those feelings of of wanting, but like with a hunger that was kind of terrifying. Um, be like an exhaustion that was like deep within me, that was like probably just an exhaustion from maintaining this hypervigilance. And I'll say also, this goes, I don't know how, it's like the fractal onion, um, nautilus kind of thing. It's like, I don't know how deep this goes because I just keep finding new layers, and it's just like new layers of like release and freedom. And a lot of it has to do with seeing things clearly. Actually, I'm not gonna get into that because this is like I've already gone too far. I've already gone too far. This isn't even cold medicine, this is just being sick. So I'm gonna read this. This is like very, and the thing is, I'm about to switch gears. If memory serves, this is like super practical. This is definitely like, it's just in the ephemera. Now I'm gonna be like, boom, doom, come back down to reality. So I'm gonna start reading. This starts on page 289, but it's only 4 lines. So I'd listed this on the YouTube descriptors starting at 290. So if you're following along. So when I advise and consult, the people and companies I speak with are often working ahead of where they actually are in the process of creating and building. The following is a look at the order of operations that I call the funnel. Similar to Chapter 11's ascension path, it doesn't always happen in exact order, but keep in mind that when a hub is skipped, there's an impact on future progress. So the funnel here, and I'll show you. Boop, on this page. So the 7th hub is inquiry and inspiration, getting an idea. And something, I don't know if there's going to be more in this. I don't know if I'm spoiler alerting this, but the thing about this is the 7th hub in this space. I've spoken to this in a number of times, but I'll speak to it again, which is like to be in this incredibly numinous, liminal, luminous space where there are no answers is incredibly uncomfortable for me. It has been, it's like now it's not so much, but in my earlier processes, to exist where you have no answers. And this is why this path starts from the bottom up. It's to be able to create the feelings of safety, be able to manage emotions, be able to have a sense of internalized identity, to be able to have like self-worth and self-esteem and like I'm just walking up the hubs right now. To have specifically those like self-worth, like and self-love, for lack of a better term. Like unconditional love for oneself is probably the better one. But to have that foundation makes existing in this like liminal space significantly more reasonable, because if we go into this like very dispersed, expansive state and we don't feel physically safe and we don't have a really at least some hold on our emotions and the feelings that arise and understanding what they are and having some tools to manage them. If our identity is like very much tied to how other people perceive us, and if our belief in our being lovable is on, put on conditions about like, it's what, like things about us versus just existing, this space can activate all of that and create tremendous amounts of anxiety. I mean, I experienced it. So, and another thing I want to bring up is that, and this comes up, I think, in this section, I think, is that oftentimes, actually, and I brought this up before, I think this might be in the no sound version, but the idea of following a calling when you don't know what it is like usually considered to be kind of embarrassing, to be like, well, I have this thing I want to do and I don't have all the answers. I don't know what it is. And it's like, like, oh my gosh, how could I ever, start to make, like the idea is like kind of like if you were to, like quit your job, that you'd have to have like the business plan and everything, which is, for some people, it's a matter of like fact. But I just want to point to like that, having like bringing deeper roots into the idea of like, if you feel something aching inside of you, that like that you feel purpose, like, and you're like, what is it? And this is embarrassing. I don't know what it is. And if I don't know what it is, how ridiculous of me to be considering myself somebody, or to even like raise the fact that I should be making space for this. And also, like, if you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the answers. No matter how prepared you are, you don't have all the answers. It doesn't matter. But this is actually, I've had, meetings and conversations and hangouts with executives who are like, I really want to build something. I just don't really know what it would be. And you see that a lot in business, where people just kind of do me too, or versions of things that already exist. There's a lot of that because the doing When we get into like like the creation for a lot of people begins in lower hubs. It begins lower than this. So we're talking about like creating out of like the ether, creation. So seventh hub, inquiry and inspiration. We'll get into that. The sixth hub is visualization. So seeing in your mind's eye both the idea and the understanding that to achieve your goal, you'll need to grow beyond your current capability. What will that be? So this is like, I'm just going to reemphasize, like, you don't know what these things are yet. Like that, it's just like, I'm like basically putting signposts on a like roadmap to say like, this is what we're going to do. We are going to do this. And that these issues tend to be enough to stop people in their tracks in the process of creation. Like, I don't even know what I do, right? So it's like, give up and just feel the angst. And also the visualization, which comes after the idea, but there's also part of this thing of like, who am I to do this? And it's like, well, you become who the person is that can do it by doing it. Very important. And I'll tell you, there are people that really grab on that and understand what I'm talking about, who've already received a lot of social conditioning that validates them as creators, and they have that inherent thing, and like that can create breakthroughs. But this is for everyone. That's a notion for everyone. And part of becoming that person is that you're going to have to stretch yourself beyond what you are, which is going to be uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. Like that's what we worked on in the ascending path, which is like the ability to have this very different relationship with being uncomfortable, like a curiosity around it, an interest in yourself. So fifth hub, communication, putting the vision into words for others to understand, as well as listening and being receptive to feedback. So everything that it's been sort of a solo journey up until this, and now we're trying to figure out how do we connect this with the world, because most of what we're talking about when it's making a dream into reality is bringing something into a shared reality with others. This is really important, because you see a lot of people that are like, I'm manifesting, it's my idea, it's on my terms, this is mine, 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 mine. And really, what we're trying to do is take something that's within us and connect it to the within of others. So, this is something where I see a lot of people in pain as they're becoming very creative and connected to like their dreams and their idea, that their notions of what they want to be creating and building in their life, is that it isn't just about you. This is part of the thing why this is in the self-transcendence section of this book, where it's like you have to self-actualize, and then the self-transcendence comes because it does have to do with how we link with others. And this is the beginning of it. It's like, how do you begin to express yourself? And we're going to talk about timing for that, what makes sense. Because there are things that are also really important about when it makes sense to start telling people when something is in a very delicate nascent stage about what we're exposing it to. So we'll talk about that. Then the fourth hub is people and relationships, understanding why your project matters to people and figuring out the team you'll need and how to recruit it to make it happen. I'm reading this and I'm like, this is really good. This is really good. And I'm telling you, I'm saying this from like the standpoint of having built really successful commercial organizations, and how this is such an important step in figuring out how to make money, which is understanding why an idea you have or something you have to offer matters to someone. And part of that really means it really involves having a curiosity. So it's the communication of like learning how to express what it is that you're doing, at the same time hearing how people respond to it and understanding how to link what you're doing in a way that really matters to the world. I will say, as a consultant, this is something people really hate. People really hate this part. I've never worked with someone to this day who has been like, "Yeah, let's go for it," because this is exactly what a relationship is, which is, where where people say, "Well, what makes a marriage work," right? And it's like, well, being able to compromise. And there's any relationship involves compromise. And this is one of the paradoxes, which is that integrity and compromise, and to compromise for the integrity of others. Because our integrity isn't an absolute truth. So this is the web that is spun to create this tapestry that's really something absolutely transcendent. But the idea that it's like our integrity is a fixed thing that everybody needs to subdue themselves to is actually where we see a lot of like adaptations and problems arise from, a lot of damage to other people and their need for them to create adaptations to survive them. So people in relationships. Then the third hub is action and focus. So comprehensively clarifying what needs to be done, creating a manageable plan with goals and timelines, and driving it to execution. So third hub is a place where people like me historically and other people that are conventionally successful are very strong typically. And you'll see this map right back to the third hub in chapter 6 as discussed, which is like if you have an inflated third hub, action and focus, getting things done, driving things, goals, timelines, execution. These are qualities that are just, they're really master qualities in the creation of things. Because execution without that, it's like it kind of stays in this, like in the seventh to fourth hub, which is just sort of ideas and people and this and that. And this is when we're starting to draw people in and draw sort of like material reality into the picture, which is that it's like the action, of like starting to cohese things and bring things together and build things and communicate. So it's one thing to communicate, but then it's like to actually like start making prototypes and make things and then start making the things. And so this is something, it's like action. And this is where activation is really important, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to, and this is where the divide happens for a lot of people, is that you see this part be sort of a fall off point where it's kind of like, oh, action, I don't have energy, for people who've been able to do upper hubs. So this is where in the fourth hub, and we'll get into these exercises where it's like recruiting people and actively creating a strategy that involves how to become activated. And also in the third hub, we'll talk more about how to actually break things down so that taking action is more natural. The other thing too is I'm going to point to a third hub is that what happens with some folks is that there's a tendency to think, well, I'm not doing it, so so it's not for me or whatever. And so another thing about third hub and action is about being able to shift gears and do things in different ways. Like if you are following this pathway down and there's just a real block to the actions that need to take place, it means you need to think of different actions. This is a place to get stuck, is to be like, this is the only way to do it. And it's, and I can't get myself to do it, or it's not working. It's like, try something else. And so this is where being like unattached to things leads to so much more productivity. And this is something I'm particularly good at, which is being able to just absolutely let go huge amounts of work and proceed with like from scratch. Because it's like, it's the cognitive bias of sunk cost fallacy, like the belief that it's like, look, I've already put a lot of work into this one way. And I don't want to let it go because of the investment I've put in, but it's just like you just keep putting effort into something that's just draining you. So this is also a part of the third hub which is kind of an interesting thing. So second hub is inner and outer emotional awareness. So tuning the project to be emotionally evocative for its target audience, being aware of and being able to manage your own emotions. Okay, I'm not going to talk that much about that. But the one point I will point back to is in the fourth hub, which is ultimately manifestation involves others. It involves connection. And it's like this inconvenient thing because like one of the things is like first to like really manifest really unique things, there's this kind of separation. But part of bringing it into the world is it requires that other people want to be involved in it, that other people want it. That it's meaningful to people, that it creates it activates their own process, their own journey, their own actualization, their own self-transcendence. The idea that you're a manifestation and like the thing that you create is in the service of like kind of your own furthering of your own whatever, it's missing a really important facet of seeing and accessing the power that's possible here, like what's possible to access, which is if you can tap into, what moves a heart, if you can tap into why what you're doing helps somebody else in a way in doing something that truly matters to them, and that you can support that in a meaningful way, that creates a lot of fuel and energy. And then the first hub is completion and consistency. So it's kind of the drudgery, honestly. It's the mundane, which is fulfilling your commitments, building trust through consistent action, and making the project real. This is the thing where it's like, okay, can you maintain, like, can you, the promises you made, can you fulfill them? Can you consistently execute? Because the first hub is about consistency. It's about things that are always there. So this idea of like grounded, repetitive consistency, showing up, boom, boom, boom. And also one of the things that's important to point to here is that this is a place where like bullshit in the upper hubs winds up knocking on your door, and you wind up having to pay for like stupid, careless, ignorant promises or lies, or like if you're not cleaning house, like if you're not keeping the hygiene in this process. The first hub in terms of the completion and consistency is where all of the, as far as a funnel is, like all the junk from the upper hubs kind of lands in there. So the better you can do to handle things further up the funnel, clarify things, this is in a practical sense, this is where like legal processes and being and thinking into the future about like outcomes and yeah. So yeah, it's probably a little too much to talk about in this format. So anyway, so many creation stories are more about building than they are about creation. They start in the middle of the funnel by using an idea that already exists with some modification, but no substantive advancement, or that hasn't been vetted through the essential fifth hub process of communication and feedback. Also, the fourth hub enrollment of other people may have happened before the essential work of the earlier stages of ideation has been done. Whatever. When stages are skipped, the price will be paid later, especially through an inability to articulate or truly understand your venture's value proposition, or in lacking a clear understanding of its value outside outside your insular world. Yeah, it just occurred to me that it's like the first 3, the 7, 6, and 5 are, like, creating, and 4, 3, 2, and 1 are building. It just occurred to me right now in this very moment. Okay. So before I discuss the stratospheric space of the upper hubs, a few words about timing and the counterbalance of containment and practical physical considerations. When I'm asked to do an advisory call as a consultant for an early stage company, time is short. I get straight to the point with 2 questions. Let's see what these questions are. What is your specific goal and purpose, and how will you measure success? The first diagnostic is the starting point before asking more detailed questions to figure out where the company's efforts will have the most impact based on where it actually is versus where it believes itself to be. It's an efficient way for me to figure out where a company is in the funnel. Being vague is an indication that it's still in the early upper hubs, and lacking a clear vision and explanation is the best tell I know. Regardless of the level of investment in the activities of a more mature business, there's no skipping steps. Yeah, this is kind of a key thing. I mean, this it's so common. I mean, I just like I mentioned in the communication, and then the connection with other people is so commonly skipped. Like, commonly skipped in startup companies. I mean, to the point that you've got companies and they pay for this in the way where you get a company that can get to, some a significant level of revenue. Like, I think you can get to, like, 20, 30 million and still not really know what your value proposition is, that your customers are finding you and they're understanding what it does and they're buying from you, but that you're talking about, people talk about like sort of the features and functions, and they're not understanding the actual underlying need and how it looks from the viewpoint of the company. It's so common. I almost think it's like almost it's so common that it's sort of like just the norm. Yeah. The other thing, okay, so what is your specific goal and purpose, and how will you measure success? So this is something that is a valuable contemplation for a very particular thing, which is how honest with yourself can you be about what you want? And going back to talking about, I was talking about earlier about my own process, that the beginning of this year, for me, one of my biggest revelations in terms of my own self-awareness is how much I needed other people to feel valued, valued and validated, and that my Parinama process this year has really transformed that. And the thing, to be fair, like, if I'd been asked that, my goal and purpose, how will I measure success? I think I did know that. It was well known that in companies that I work for, that I cared about the people more than I cared about anything else, which, to be fully transparent, was usually used as a mark against me, even though that my methodology was quite successful. But I don't think I understood what that meant for me, what I needed and what success was for me. Yeah. So I think that's a good one. I'm gonna spend some time with that myself, which is really thinking about that in the, like, how what is my specific goal and purpose, and how will I measure success? to spend some time with that. I'm gonna actually underline that. It's really good. This book's really good. Has anybody ever have I mentioned that before? I think I have. Okay. Second is how long can you do this before you need to make money? And what other limiting considerations are there? The so-called funding runway of a company or an individual's personal cash reserves must be considered part of a project's practical reality. This is first hub stuff. Mundane but essential. Remember, if physical needs like food and shelter are threatened, you will be distracted. If you don't have the resources right now, become focused on creating them and setting yourself up to succeed by building skills, cash, and network. Timing is a necessary consideration for this process. Yeah, this is, like, I don't know, like, the one thing I'll say is this was, like, really an unsexy thing to bring up because there's all this stuff in creating, which is, like, let go of fear and be, just, let the wind, whatever. Like, I don't think that that's true. I think that there is fine tuning that can be happening all the while. And for me, it was. I mean, when I'm talking about, reading The Secret and being afraid of leaving my job because I was scared that I would lose everything that was surrounding me and creating like comfort and a sense of safety and relief. um in that process, in that time, I spent, it wasn't wasted. Like, I spent a lot of years, like mundane years, doing like professional work at like, at high volume, and being very invested in it, and also having a lot of conflicted feelings about it and all this kind of stuff. But like, the important thing is like, I think in this is to give yourself a fucking break. If it's like, well, I should be chasing my dreams and why am I such a coward? It's like, there's a practical reality. And there are people that might disagree with me, and I'm fine with that. Like, I see how that could be true as well. It hasn't really been, in my own experience as a person who is completely responsible for myself and doesn't have family to fall back on, um, that in order for me to even create this space to be able to examine the notion of safety truly as safety as being independent from having money, I had to have money. I had to have enough, like, I had to be wealthy. Like, full disclosure, I don't know, um, how to reconcile that. And I think I just have to be really transparent about that because I could never advise someone, I love my TikToks and I love, you know, my popular culture stuff. And I see like people that I don't think are really in the position to be advising people about taking taking risks that they're not prepared to be accountable for. And I know this is like, and there's ways to do this which aren't like living in a, back bay luxury. It's like reducing your cost of living, like finding a place to live that doesn't cost as much, like really, and like reducing your spending. I mean, I did a lot of that. I did a lot of that. I got very lucky in certain ways that like sort of expanded my situation. But I'll also say there are ways that are just very practical as far as like thinking about like, how do I create this abundance in terms of being able to have my time and my space The abundance isn't like, I'm not thinking big enough. I should be able to drive a Lamborghini and all this bullshit. That stuff's bullshit. That stuff is really bullshit. I mean, the thing, and this goes back to like, what is your specific goal and purpose? It's thinking about what you really want. This goes back to my secret exercise, which is like, well, what do you really want? How do you want to feel? How do you want your life to feel? Is it that certain things seem like they'd be filled with love and admiration and appreciation? If you had certain things that like somehow there's also these things that are sort of, sort of getting drafted in with feelings of connection and love and appreciation and validation and feeling good and safe and happy, and that it's like looking at things like things that to own or accomplish or get like is it those things, or is it what the feeling that is sort of imagined that comes with them? Because that's part of the thing. I mean, like decoupling that stuff and like actually being able to look at it so that you can see these things more clearly can save you a lifetime. Because time is not on our side here. Like time isn't actually as much on our side. So the more we can become clear, the more we don't spend valuable time and energy chasing things that are actually not like just really, that we can learn things that we could have potentially contemplated and understood and saved ourselves a couple steps. So I'm being candid. I'm not, and I also um, I don't pretend to be saying what's an absolute truth. I just don't really, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I had not, and I think there's a number of things that are just like fortunate, and we could do all the sort of kind of stuff that's like, yeah, I was good at manifesting, but if anything, I was just really good at the third hub stuff. Like manifesting is this combination of having like a very clear vision and being like absolutely relentless in the pursuit of it. And also a bunch of other factors that are societal, cultural. So I guess what I'd say to that, as far as like the runway number 2, which is like the practical reality of creating and building things, is like how much space, it's like it's like there, if I would have cut my expenses down. I would have found a way. There's a way. There's a way. I mean, at least I think there is. But that also could be some like white blindness. So okay, so following is an assay of the top-down process working through each descending hub, along with practical exercises targeting common obstructions. It goes step by step, using a selection of exercises, identifying pitfalls, and eliminating the common blocks encountered in the transitions. And so, okay, that's it for the reading part today. And what I will say is that I've practiced and used this like so many times. I don't even know how to count anymore, or I do know how to count still, but it's like this is a way. It is proven, and there's still, I'll say there are still people that pay me tremendous amounts of money to be able to do this. I'm not in. It's just that my energy source for that has been cut off. So for whatever reason, I'm here talking to nobody right now, explaining it, which is like what feels the most alive for me. So make sense of that. Makes sense. Like, I feel and, like, I will tell you what I feel like now having read this. Like, I feel like my work is done. So, I mean, this is the thing. It's like it's the feeling of the satisfaction of having done what I'm supposed to do, I've accomplished here, which on the surface makes absolutely no sense. Because it's like, well, I just, like, kinda spoke for an hour to nobody. Um, didn't make any money. I'm trying to think of some other like, so, like, obviously no validation, no audience, no money made from this in, like, right now, like, in this moment. And the kite, it's a kite thing. So, so whatever that is, I trust it now. I trust it completely. And I see when I look at this, I think, for me, the 2 parts of this exercise and what I'd encourage you if you're following along here is first is to be specific. What is your goal and purpose, and how will you measure success? And I want to encourage, like, kind of saying, like, so what? So it's like, well, I've got, I make this much money. If it's like money or a year, it's like, so what? So what? So what? Until you can get to something that has like no more so what. Just be like, yeah, that's self-evident. And that's as far as you can go. I'm not gonna say like how so what that can go. It's like all of a sudden you're like a nanoparticle of floating in space. It's just to say like, so I could, I want, I'll do like a kind of conventional one. It's like, I want a big, somebody might say this, I want to be clear. This isn't something I want because I don't want to be like speaking this into a spell. This is an example. Somebody say, I want a big house in Newton. So what? So you can do what? So I can have guests over, so I can fill it with my family. Okay, so tell me more about the guests and the family. Like, what do those relationships look like? Like, what do you want in those? Like, so what? So what are those? Tell me about those relationships. Like, what do those feel like? It's like, oh, and like really examine, like spend some time thinking about what you would imagine that being. Do they finally, oh wow, I guess you did make it. I was wrong about you. Wow, look, you're more successful than me. By the way, that never plays out the way you think it's going to. The idea, oh, well, I'd be safe there. It's like, believe me, owning a big, expensive home is kind of whatever. I don't want to be down on somebody wanting this stuff. I'm just saying, like, yeah, I won't, sorry if it's something that you want. I feel like this might feel judgmental, but it's kind of like get to the core of like, what is it in the accomplishment that would be really meaningful for you, that you understand right now, that you can see and understand and access. Like, what's a vignette? Like, spend some time mentally in the space and imagine, like, what does that feel like? Who are the people you're surrounded by? What does it feel like to be with those people? And this isn't a final thing. Like, this is a thing. It's like, okay, for this next thing, because it just keeps going. Like, this is a thing where it's like you get better and better at it. So it's kind of like, okay, what's the next sort of chamber in the Nautilus as I'm expanding my capacity? And the other thing is like thinking about money and the practical considerations of making space to be able to create and build something and what you would need to do it. So if you're like, look, I'd need to leave my job. So it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? It's like, and spend some time with it if you want to. And if you don't, you obviously know that you don't have to. So anyway, so the next section that we're going to go through is the 7th hub, descending. I really, you know what, the thing I'm going to make is a commitment here to myself is that I'm not going to do this next section until I have really done some work myself on the specific goal and purpose and how will I measure success. The thing with money, I already have, so I don't need to really do that much with that. Um, but I have done that. So that's like a past accomplishment that's sort of or past achievement or whatever that's been recognized and worked with. So I'm not, and so that means it's either tomorrow or the day after. My commitment is I'm actually not going to do these until I'm actually doing this process. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm sending you a lot of love and encouragement, and me and my immune system are over here just, like, making it happen. So yeah, and my cat is snoring over there. Anyway, I'm sending you a lot of love and encouragement. Thank you for listening and coming along for this, and, I'm looking forward let's build some stuff. Let's make a new world possible. All right. Love you. See you soon. Bye.